The Confluence hung in the void between contested stars. To Elara Tessere, watching from her cockpit, it looked less like a station and more like a captured heartbeat. Its surface pulsed with a slow, hypnotic rhythm of amber and blue light. It was beautiful. The station's structure was a lattice of crystalline biomatter. This living material grew in layered veins, each one singing with a soft inner glow. It gave the Confluence an organic, almost fragile appearance. She recognized it as a masterpiece of artisan engineering. Bio-sculptors shaped living tissue into both art and architecture over centuries. The work had grown the entire structure into existence. The alien species responsible for this work called themselves the Bloomsong. These plantoid beings built their stations from living crystalline biomatter. Their bodies were cascades of violet leaf plates and slender root-like tendrils. Her own ship, the Steadfast, felt crude in this whispering gallery. She guided it into the designated dock. The vessel was a block of welded metal and ceramic plating, its lines brutally functional. It slid into the organic cradle with a shudder. The docking clamps, grown to order, enfolded her hull with a gentle, living grip. Elara powered down the thrusters and listened. The silence of her ship was a human silence, full of ticks of cooling metal and the low drone of life support. Beyond the airlock, the Confluence breathed. She met her liaison in the Arboretum concourse. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and loam. Chorus-of-Petals awaited her beneath a canopy of glowing fronds. The Bloomsong diplomat was a cascade of violet leaf plates and slender, root-like tendrils. It moved with a gentle, perpetual rustling, as if stirred by a private breeze. Its voice was a harmonic whisper generated from the trembling of its fronds. "Broker Tessere, the Confluence welcomes you. We trust your passage was without discord." The sound was soothing, melodic. "It was quiet, Ambassador. Thank you for receiving me." Elara kept her own voice neutral, professional. She had practiced this. The Bloomsong valued harmony in all things. "We walk, yes. The station wishes to know you." Chorus began to drift along a path of spongy, moss-like flooring. Elara fell in beside it, her bootsteps absurdly loud. "The dispute you have come to mediate involves a place my people hold sacred. It is called the Ember Nebula by the wider galaxy. To us, it is not merely a cloud of gas. It is a memory." Elara nodded. This was in the brief. The Equa-ancients were temporal ghosts. They had transcended linear time. Their passing could imprint space itself with psychic resonance. To the Bloomsong, such places were sacred groves for meditation and spiritual growth. "The Varath," Chorus continued, a slight discordance entering its whisper, "see only resource. This militaristic species of chitinous insectoids cares only for material gain. They wish to strip mine the nebula for materials to fuel their industrial processes. This would destroy the memory forever." They arrived at a seemingly solid wall of interlaced crystal. Chorus extended a tendril. The wall parted without a sound, revealing a corridor. It had not been there a moment before. "Your quarters," Chorus whispered. "A void pocket, private and secure." Elara stepped through. The space inside was larger than her entire ship. The walls were a smooth, pearlescent gray, utterly featureless. It was a stabilized space fold. This technology created a region of compressed space held safely within the station's bulk. The air was still and tasted faintly of static. A wide, transparent section offered a view of the docking arms. A constant, low hum came from a stabilizer field. The field maintained the pocket's integrity. The room was spacious, sterile, and profoundly alien. "It is ample," Elara said. "The station's harmony is complex," Chorus whispered, perhaps sensing her discomfort. "This space does not interfere. Rest, broker. The Varath ambassador will likely make contact soon. They prefer directness." With another rustle, the doorway sealed, leaving Elara alone with the hum. She walked to the window. Her reflection in the crystal was a stark outline, a human woman in a practical gray shipsuit, her dark hair pulled back, her face all angles and resolve. Behind that ghost, the real view held her attention. Another ship was docking. Where the Steadfast was blunt, this vessel was a blade. It was all sharp, chitinous angles and jagged plating, the color of burnt iron. It did not settle into its cradle. It stabbed into it with a violent, precise finality. The delicate station trembled, a Varath warship. Her console chimed, a sharp human sound in the sterile room. The message was text-only, scrolling onto the screen in stark, blocky galactic standard. "Broker Tessere. Ambassador Hive Commandant Dral of the Varath Swarm Compact expects your presence in Dock Sector Gamma aboard the vessel Chitin's Will in 1 standard hour. Do not be late." It was not a request. It was a summons, a clear power play. The Varath were testing the new broker. Elara felt the old, quiet shame rise in her throat. She looked from the brutal warship outside to her own reflection. She smoothed her shipsuit. "Okay," she said to the empty, humming room. "Let's go." Chorus-of-Petals retreated into the heart of the Confluence. The station's living structure grew denser and more fragrant there. The air thickened into a gentle mist, carrying the scent of night-blooming fungi and damp soil. This was the Bloomsong Enclave, a garden dome. The walls pulsed with a soft, internal light. The liaison settled its root mass into a nurturing socket in the floor. It extended its sensory fronds, thin filaments glowing with a faint amber light. With a thought, chorus wove itself into the psionic network. This telepathic weave allowed instantaneous communion. Thoughts arrived not as sterile words, but as layered impressions. The Bloom Council's conduit was this network. The council consisted of 5 elder blooms. Their forms were vast and ancient, rooted in the sacred groves of the homeworld. Their collective presence usually felt like a deep, warm forest. Now it felt like a forest awaiting a storm. "The Varath warship has anchored," Chorus sent. Its thought stream carried the visual memory of the jagged vessel docking. Its approach was deliberate, a display of force. A cascade of concern flowed back. The council shared snippets of Varath history, worlds stripped to their cores, species displaced or consumed for resources. Bloomsong defenses were elegant. Their primary shield was a psionic ward. This mental barrier could deflect intrusive thought forms and psychic aggression. It required constant attunement by skilled nurturers. Their hulls were layered with adaptive plating. This living tissue could analyze incoming fire and gradually harden against it, but the ward and plating were slow to reconfigure. Each piece was a unique, handcrafted artifact. They could not be mass-produced. "And the human?" The council's query came, a shimmer of cautious hope. Chorus shared its impressions of Elara Tessere, her solid form, her direct gaze, the sincerity in her voice. The council perceived this. Then they perceived the crude human vessel that had brought her, the short span of human history since they stumbled into FTL. The hope dimmed. It was replaced by a profound, weary resignation. "They have nothing to offer but their neutrality," came the consensus. "Their words may be well-intentioned, but words do not stop kinetic lances." Chorus felt the despair of its people seep into its own core. They were artists, philosophers, and historians. The Varath were soldiers and engineers. The Ember Nebula was not just a cloud of gas to the Bloomsong. It was a psychic memory, a recording of a long-dead star's final song. To the Varath, it was just rare minerals. "We must still try," Chorus sent. "We will offer resonance." Disengaging from the weave, Chorus moved to a crystalline basin at the chamber's center. From a hidden compartment, it drew forth the offering. 3 resonance crystals, each the size of a human fist, glowed from within. They pulsed gently with captured light. To a Bloomsong, they were vessels of profound peace and memory. Each one had been grown over decades inside special harmonic chambers. These spaces were constantly bathed in specific psychic frequencies. The frequencies imbued the crystals with their power. To the Varath, Chorus feared they would be assessed for their mineral content. Then the sharp signal came. It was a psionic pulse, raw and aggressive, slamming against the periphery of the enclave's wards. It carried no message, only sheer force. The harmonic tones in the dome stuttered into discord. Chorus felt the ward strain. A sudden pressure built behind its ocular buds as the nurturing Bloomsong fought to stabilize the barrier. The pulse subsided. The silence left behind was worse. The Varath were not waiting for the negotiations to begin. They had already started. The air in the meeting chamber tasted of ozone and crushed petals. Elara stood between 2 worlds, her boots planted on the smooth, warm wood of the Bloomsong's living architecture. To her left, Chorus-of-Petals and 2 other Bloomsong diplomats stood in a gentle arc. Their collective psionic aura was a low, mournful thrum. To her right, the Varath delegation occupied a space they had commandeered. Their presence was a cold, geometric intrusion. Hive Queen Zix was a sculpture of chitin and implied threat. Her body was a segmented, iridescent carapace. 4 multi-jointed limbs held her upright. Her head was a smooth dome dominated by a cluster of multifaceted eyes. When she spoke, a fine membrane on her thorax vibrated. It produced a dry, clicking rasp. "The Ember Nebula is a navigational nexus," Zix stated. A holographic chart flickered to life above the Varath disk. It showed gravity wells and shift lane convergence points. Our hive fleet migratory cycles have used its gravitational eddies for 7 generations. Its mineralogical composition is secondary. The spiritual claims of the Bloomsong are not a recognized resource metric under Galactic Council accords. Chorus-of-Petals stirred. The nebula is not a resource. It is a memory, a psychic echo of a stellar nursery. To strip mine it is to erase a library of cosmic becoming. Zix's cluster of eyes focused on the plantoid diplomat. Echoes do not power engines. Memories do not shield hulls. Your library is a phantom. We deal in material reality. Elara stepped forward, her boot meeting the Varath disc with a definitive tap. Material reality includes long-term political stability. Ambassador Zix, the Council may not recognize spiritual value, but they do recognize treaties. A shared use accord is possible. Designate lanes for your migrations. Establish protected zones for Bloomsong contemplation. Coexistence creates a durable peace. For a moment, only the hum of the hologram filled the space. Then Zix emitted a rapid series of clicks. Elara's translator implant coldly interpreted it as a scoff. Coexistence, Zix rasped. The hologram zoomed out to a map of the local galactic arm. Human space was a tiny, pale blue smudge. Is a concept entertained by entities of comparable strategic weight. Her eyeless gaze swung to Elara. The Galactic Council recognizes strength. It is the primary currency. You are a broker. Your species has FTL capability for less than a standard stellar cycle. Your greatest export is cultural entertainment media and bulk structural alloys. You have demonstrated no strength. You possess only neutrality. Neutrality is the absence of currency. The words landed on Elara not as an insult, but as a verdict. She felt her professional facade crack. Strength isn't just about who has the biggest gun, Elara said. Her voice was tighter than she intended. Analysis confirms it is precisely that, Zix interrupted. Your proposed shared-use model is a delay tactic. It allows the weaker party to gather sympathy. It is inefficient. The Varath hive fleet arrives in this sector in 14 standard cycles. The nebula will be prepared for our use. The crack in Elara's composure widened. She could feel the Bloomsong's resignation. Chorus-of-Petals was utterly silent. And what happens after? The question burst from Elara. You take the nebula, you leave a devastated zone and a species that becomes your permanent enemy. You create instability that will fester. The Council might recognize strength, but they also have to clean up the wars that strength starts. You are not creating a solution. You are just creating the next problem. Hive Queen Zix went perfectly still. Her eye facets rotated, studying Elara anew. The next problem will be dealt with when it manifests, Zix stated. Your emotional projection is noted and irrelevant. She retracted her manipulator limbs. The hologram died. The negotiations are terminated. Without another word, she turned. Her escort of 2 armored Varath warriors fell in behind her. The metallic disc retracted its legs and floated after them. The door irised shut. The silence they left behind was thick and heavy. Chorus-of-Petals finally moved, a slow, wilting bow. You spoke with fire, Broker Tessere. We thank you for the attempt. The fire, however, does not warm the void. Elara gave a short, stiff nod and walked out. Her footsteps echoed in the suddenly hollow corridor. Back in the sterile silence of her void pocket quarters, the hum of the stabilizer field was an angry insect in her ear. She stood in the center of the room, not seeing the smooth, gray walls. She saw the cold facets of Zix's eyes. She heard the final, dismissive click of terminated. Words had failed. Diplomacy had been brushed aside. The Bloomsong's beautiful biotech, their psychic wards and adaptive living hulls had inspired only despair. The galaxy's currency was strength. Humanity, it seemed, was bankrupt. Elara thought of tools. She walked to the room's only terminal, a flat panel set into the wall. She activated a secure, encrypted channel. It was a tight beam linked to her courier ship, the Whisper, docked in the station's external cradle. She bypassed the communications suite. She accessed the raw data core. Authorization Tessere Omega. Pull all schematics tagged Sol Forge, Standard Defensive Portfolio, Tier 1. Her voice was flat. The terminal screen filled with a menu. She ignored the complex theoretical designs. She scrolled down to the very bottom, to the basics. A file resolved into a rotating 3-dimensional schematic. It was brutally simple. A central power core, a standardized coupling interface, a mount for a single kinetic projectile battery or a point defense laser array. Its armor was uniform hexagonal plating. Its software was open source, military grade, and dumb. It had no psychic wards. It could not adapt. It was a box that could shoot. It was designed to be built by automated orbital dockyards with molten metal presses and robotic welders. A Sentinel platform, Module DF-01. The specifications listed its construction time in a Class II human orbital forge, 4 hours, 17 minutes. The cost was denoted in metric tons of steel, silicon, and deuterium. Elara stared at the spinning, ugly, beautiful design. It was not a weapon of war, not by itself. It was a component, a single brick. The Varath hive fleet was a monolith. The Bloomsong defense was a delicate, singular sculpture. Humanity's strength, she realized with a cold, settling clarity, was not in making one perfect thing. It was in making the next one, and the next, and the 10,000 after that. She zoomed in on the schematic, on the stark, functional lines of it. The hum of the stabilizer field faded into the background. All she heard was the imagined roar of the forge. The silence in Elara's sterile quarters felt heavier than the void outside her window. The elegant failure of the mediation chamber clung to her. She had offered words, and words had been shown to be worthless. The only currency here was force, and humanity had brought none, or so they thought. She requested a private audience, not in a garden, not in a chamber of state. In her own void pocket, a place of flat gray surfaces and harsh, human-standard lighting. Chorus-of-Petals arrived like a ghost entering a tomb. "Broker Tessere," chorus chimed, its melody subdued. "You requested solitude. Does despair seek a witness?" "No," Elara said. "Despair is a luxury. I am out of luxuries." She turned a palm-sized data slate on the table between them. With a tap, a holographic schematic bloomed in the air. It was angular, brutally simple, a nest of power conduits and emitter arrays. "This is a Mark III kinetic barrier projector," Elara stated. "A human design. It creates a wall of focused gravity to stop physical projectiles, bullets, railgun slugs, fragmentation debris." Cora studied the image. Its fronds twitched in analytical curiosity. "It is inelegant. The energy consumption for the projected field density is excessive, and it offers no defense against directed energy or psionic intrusion. A singular solution." "Correct," Elara said, another tap. The schematic was replaced by a flowing diagram. "This is a human assembly chain. It is a process, not a single object." Chorus emitted a soft, chiming note of confusion. "A process for what purpose?" "One standard automated fabricator at the start of that chain can produce a complete projector in 14 hours. It just needs raw material." The diagram highlighted a boxy, complex machine. Elara leaned forward. "One fabricator makes one in 14 hours, she repeated. "With optimized routing, it can produce 10 units in 1 week. The diagram split, then multiplied. 10 fabricators can produce 100, 100, 1,000. The Bloomsong liaison went very still. The concept of scaling, of pure multiplicative output, seemed to violate a natural order. "The projector is just a frame," Elara continued. "A dumb shell. It needs a power source and a defensive matrix. You have those. You have the psionic ward cores that block mental attacks." She paused, letting the first part of her proposal sink in. "You also have the adaptive biotech seed units, the ones that grow into your living hull plating. My question is this: can the Bloomsong provide those components, the cores and the seeds?" Chorus's fronds trembled. "A Bloomweaver of the 7th harmony requires a full growth cycle to meditate a ward core into being. The process cannot be rushed. It is a song of protection woven with care. The adaptive seed pods are similar. Each is nurtured, attuned." "How many Bloomweavers are there?" Elara asked. "Within the Confluence, perhaps 20 of sufficient mastery. Across our home canopy, several thousand. But the attunement time..." Elara cut the explanation off. "I do not need the attuned cores. I need the template, the genetic and psionic blueprint from which a core is grown, the foundational pattern." A profound, horrified silence filled the room. Chorus seemed to shrink, its bioluminescence dimming. "That is a sacred resonance, the core of our defensive arts. It is not data. It is a living memory. To reduce it to a schematic is a violation. It is stripping a symphony to a single note." "I understand," Elara said. "But Zix was right about one thing. Strength is the only currency here. You have quality. The Varath have quantity of a different kind. We have a different quantity." She gestured at the frozen assembly chain schematic. "Your way, you make one perfect, beautiful thing, a work of art that can stop a psionic lance. Our way, we learn how that beautiful thing works. Then we build the machine that builds it. We do not match your quality. We will never reach it. but we can build 10,000 working copies before your weaver finishes the second masterpiece." Elara let the words hang. "We drown the problem in quantity. Give us the template for the ward core and the seed unit. My people will integrate them into that shell." She pointed at the ugly, efficient human projector. "We will give you a shield wall, not one perfect shield, a wall of 10,000 good enough shields." Chorus-of-Petals recoiled. Its fronds closed tight against its stalk, a gesture of deep distress. The cultural violation was unthinkable. Yet, Elara watched as the internal struggle played out. She saw the horror, but beneath it she saw something else. A desperate alien hope, the memory of Zix's contempt. The Ember Nebula, sacred to their entire species, about to be gutted by mining lasers. The Bloomsong were not warriors. They were gardeners in a galaxy of locusts. They had always relied on the sheer perfection of their few defenses. Now a swarm had come that did not fear perfection, only numbers. A soft system chime echoed in the void pocket. An automated alert flashed on the main display screen, a scrolling text of sensor data. Chorus turned its sensory cluster toward it. Elara read it aloud. "Long-range scan, multiple Varath signatures, cruiser class and smaller, departing their main fleet anchor point. Projected course?" She did not need to finish. The trajectory line on the tactical overlay was unambiguous. It pointed straight toward the glowing cloud of the Ember Nebula. The scout ships were moving. The clock had just run out. Chorus-of-Petals looked from the tactical display to Elara's grim face, to the schematics of the ugly human machine. The hope flickered, fought against the horror, and found a desperate purchase. "I will transmit the resonant patterns," Chorus chimed, each note trembling. "The core song of the ward, the seed memory of the adaptive plate. I will give you the symphony." It paused, its light guttering. "What will you give back to us?" Elara met its gaze. "A wall and a lesson. There is more than one kind of strength. Ours is the strength of the Forgotten Sons. We do not remember their names, but we took their light, bottled it, and built a forge. We do not craft, we produce." She reached for the data slate. "The transmission needs to be now. Every minute counts." Chorus gave a slow, mournful nod. It extended a slender, root-like tendril tipped with a faint bioluminescent node. It touched the surface of the data slate. The light pulsed, transferring not just data, but the essence of a culture's defensive soul. As the data streamed, a new schematic began to assemble itself on Elara's screen. It was breathtakingly complex, a swirling, four-dimensional pattern of light and resonance, genetics and psychic intent. It was a song given shape. Next to it, the blocky human assembly chain waited, a hungry, empty frame. Elara's fingers flew across the console. She encrypted the packet and attached the highest priority routing codes. She opened a tight beam communications channel, a focused data stream nearly impossible to intercept. Its first destination was the nearest human relay buoy. This simple node would pass the message along a secure network to a shipyard orbiting a cold, rocky world, a place called Hephaestus Station. She typed a single line of instruction alongside the sacred Bloomsong templates and the crude human schematics. "Begin production. Maximum throughput. Authorization Tessere, priority alpha." She hit send. The data packet vanished into the void, a spark of desperate hope and cultural heresy, racing against the advancing Varath swarm. In her sterile room, the only sound was the soft, weeping chime of a Bloomsong, mourning the death of its people's innocence. The transmission was a silent scream. Chorus-of-Petals felt the sacred templates leave their consciousness. It was a psychic bundle of intricate growth patterns and harmonic resonance maps. It was not a copy. It was a severing. A piece of their people's soul, cultivated over millennia, became data streaming toward the human's sterile void pocket. A profound spiritual unease settled in their core. Weeks passed in a blur of quiet dread. The Confluence station hummed its usual soothing frequencies. To Chorus, the song felt thin. They tended their arboretum. The petals of their crown body drooped slightly. They monitored the Ember Nebula. Its psychic whispers grew faint under the shadow of Varath mining probes. The galaxy held its breath. Then a new shadow fell. At the fraying edge of Bloomsong Protectorate space, a human freighter translated into reality. It was designated Foundry One. The Bloomsong scouts who witnessed its arrival sent back images laced with confusion. The vessel was a colossal, blocky thing. It was a brutalist sculpture of gray metal and stark angular lines. It made no request to dock. It did not hail anyone. It began to disassemble itself. Great modular sections, each the size of a habitat spire, detached in precise mechanical sequence. They drifted in the silent void. Crude chemical thrusters repositioned them. Magnetic clamps engaged with audible, jarring clangs over the comms channels. Gantries extended. Conduits linked. What had been a single ship unfolded and rearranged itself into a sprawling, primitive orbital factory. Raw material streamed into its maw. Attendant drones, little more than boxy thrusters with grasping arms, stripped barren asteroids nearby. They fed chunks of rock and metal into the factory's processing end. The structure vibrated with a constant, subsonic groan. Then, precisely every 6 hours, the far end of the assembly chain opened. A finished defensive platform emerged. Chorus observed the first one on the tactical feed. Their fronds trembled. It was a hybrid. The core was a brutal human frame. It housed a crude but powerful fusion reactor that bled excess heat in visible infrared waves. Bolted crudely to its side was a Bloomsong psionic ward core. The core glowed with a soft, familiar bioluminescence. It was a tiny heart of their stolen heritage beating inside a cage of cold iron. Plating the frame was a laminate armor. Outer layers were human titanium alloy, pitted and unfinished. Beneath it, already spreading like a silvery lichen, was rapidly grown Bloomsong adaptive biotech. The two materials did not merge. They were forcibly married, one layered brutally over the other. The platforms were not beautiful. They were functional. They were ugly, efficient, and numerous. They drifted on slow, economical thrusters into defensive positions around key Bloomsong worlds. They formed ragged, uneven cordons. A master artisan of the Verdaxis would have wept at their clumsiness. Chorus simply felt a deepening chill. The Varath came for a minor outpost. It was a world of singing crystals and little strategic value. It was a test, a probe of the will that remained. 3 sleek, jagged raiders descended. Warriors in chitinous armor disembarked. Their kinetic rifles chattered. Their plasma casters seared the air with emerald fire. For the first minutes, it was a slaughter. The outpost's native defenses, elegant living turrets firing calibrated pulses of light, were overwhelmed. The Varath clicked in triumph. Then they turned their weapons skyward. They aimed at the 2 human-built platforms in high orbit. The platforms were slow. Their targeting was unrefined. They spat solid projectile slugs in wide spreads. The Varath danced around them, scoring hits. Plasma washed over the hybrid armor. The human titanium scorched and bubbled. But beneath it, the Bloomsong biotech lived. It learned. It analyzed the energy signature of the plasma. It analyzed the impact frequency of the kinetics. It redirected heat away from critical systems. It restructured its cellular matrix. It hardened specifically against the Varath weapon profiles. What had been a weakness became, minute by minute, a localized strength. Simultaneously, the psionic ward cores glowed brighter. The Varath's greatest weapon was not their plasma. It was the disruptive psychic scream their hive queens could project. A wave of terror and pain that shattered concentration and will. That wave hit the platforms and splashed against the wards. The harmonic defense blunted the mental assault. It scattered its coherence into harmless psychic noise. The platforms, mindless and untroubled, kept firing. They were clumsy, they were inelegant, but there were 2 of them and they did not stop. One sustained critical damage to its human reactor housing and went dark. The other, its adaptive plating now a knotted, hardened scar over its left flank, rotated and poured a relentless hail of metal into a raider's engine array. The Varath ship limped away, trailing atmosphere and fluid. The other 2 raiders, faced with a defense that learned and endured, broke off their attack. The probe had been repelled. Aboard the Varath command vessel, Hive Queen Zix received the tactical report. The data stream clicked through her neural interface. The adaptive countermeasures, the psionic negation, the sheer stubborn volume of fire from a supposedly primitive guard post. For the first time in living memory, her constant mandible clicking ceased. The silence in her chamber was more terrifying than any scream. Her compound eyes, reflecting 100 view screens, saw not a defeat, but an equation changed. The weak had found a catalyst. The garden had grown teeth. She issued a single, silent command across the hive mind. The Varath fleet, dormant and poised at the edge of the Ember Nebula, began to mobilize in earnest. This was no longer a harvesting operation. It was a war. Back on the Confluence, Chorus-of-Petals stared at the tactical feed. They watched the damaged, victorious platform holding its orbit. Its Bloomsong core glowed. Its human frame was scarred and smoking. They saw the Foundry one in the distance, a hard, angular silhouette against the nebula's soft glow. It was disgorging another identical guardian onto the assembly line. Every 6 hours, without fail. They had wanted salvation. They had wanted to preserve the song of the Ember Nebula. Now they listened. The ancient psychic melody of the stars was still there. It was faint beneath the Varath's mining vibrations, but a new sound layered underneath it. It was the subsonic groan of the factory. It was the metallic clang of modules locking. It was the rhythmic, terrible heartbeat of production. Chorus witnessed the birth of something they did not have a name for. It was not peace. It was not victory. It was a terrifying, new kind of strength. It was born from their own sacred heart and humanity's relentless industrial will. They had saved their world, and in doing so, they feared they had doomed something far more precious. They simply stood, trembling, as another platform was born into the silent dark. The bridge of the Varath command ship Thornkist hummed with the focused fury of a hive under siege. Hive Queen Zik stood at the center of a semicircle of tactical drones. Their chitinous limbs twitched over hololithic displays, showing the nebula's edge in stark, angry colors. Each of her ships moved with the precision of a single organism. Their beam cannons lanced out in coordinated volleys. Such force could strip the armor from a battleship in seconds. Against the Bloomsong, such a formation would have been decisive. The living ships were elegant, but they were slow. Their adaptive hulls took time to learn a new weapon's frequency, time the Varath had never given them. But the humans did not fight like the Bloomsong. Elara Tessere watched the tactical feed from the Confluence's observation lounge. Her fingers pressed flat against the cool surface of a console pulsing with faint, organic light. Beside her, Chorus-of-Petals stood rigid. Its fronds trembled with a frequency Elara had learned to recognize as profound distress. The hybrid platforms were ugly things. They looked like someone had welded a metal box to a living heart, then bolted guns and shield projectors to every available surface. They had no grace, no symmetry, no soul, but they moved into the line of fire with a mechanical indifference. The Varath tactics faltered. One platform took a direct hit from a Varath beam cannon. Its kinetic barrier flared, held for a full second, then collapsed. The beam punched through the hull. The platform detonated in a silent bloom of debris. Chorus-of-Petals let out a soft, keening sound. Another lost. Elara did not look away from the feed. Watch. Two more platforms drifted into the gap. Their ward cores flickered as they calibrated against the Varath weapon's frequency. Their adaptive plating rippled, hardening in response to the energy signature. They opened fire with their own crude projectiles. The shots were poorly aimed, but they forced the Varath ship to adjust its position. Behind the line, a human freighter hung in the void like a bloated metal seed. It was unarmed. Its hull glowed with the heat of internal forges. Onboard fabricators chewed through raw material. They extruded prefabricated sections. Automated tug drones guided those sections into position. The process was not elegant. It was not beautiful. It was fast. Elara watched a Varath cruiser pivot to face the freighter. Its hull was scarred and angry. Its main cannon began to glow, charging for a kill shot that would gut the unarmed vessel. "They have seen the supply line," Elara said. Her voice was flat. "They know what they have to do." Chorus-of-Petals turned its eyeless face toward her. "Can the freighter survive a direct hit from a Varath main cannon?" "No," Elara said. "It does not have to." The cannon fired. A lance of condensed energy, bright enough to blind optical sensors, streaked across the battlefield. It was aimed with surgical precision at the freighter's reactor core. A half-assembled platform, still trailing cables and welding sparks, was shoved into the path by a tug drone. The drone's engines flared as it pushed the incomplete construct directly into the beam's trajectory. The platform vaporized, its component atoms scattered into the void. The tug drone was thrown backward, its hull scorched but intact. The freighter survived. Elara let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. 10 minutes, she said, maybe 12. Chorus-of-Petals tilted its head. What happens in 10 minutes? They launch a replacement. The Varath tactical rhythm began to break. Their formations relied on coordinated volleys and precise timing. They faltered as they found themselves firing at targets that were not there, or at targets already dead, or at targets that absorbed the hit and then opened fire with projectiles crude but numerous. The hybrid platforms died in ones and twos, but for every one destroyed, 2 more drifted into the line. Their ward cores flared, their plating adapted. The Varath were not fighting an enemy, they were fighting a tide. On the bridge of the Thornkist, Hive Queen Zik slammed her clawed hand against the hololithic display. The surface cracked. The tactical drones around her flinched. "This is not warfare," she snarled. "This is waste, this is madness." She turned from the display. Her multifaceted eyes reflected the chaos of the battle. Her mind raced, calculating losses, projecting outcomes. Every calculation ended the same way. The humans would replace what she destroyed. She could not replace her ships fast enough. Her clawed hand opened a secure channel to the Galactic Council's observation node. It was a neutral station drifting at the edge of the system. The transmission was a raw burst of fury, unpolished and undiplomatic. "The Galactic Council is witnessing a crime," Zix broadcast. "Humanity is warmongering. They have armed a neutral species with weapons of industrial slaughter. They have turned a sacred dispute into a factory floor. I demand immediate intervention. I demand sanctions. I demand that the humans be stripped of their FTL privileges and confined to their home system until they learn the meaning of restraint." The channel went silent for a long moment. Then a voice answered, soft and ancient, like dust settling on a stone. The echo-ancient known as Memory of Dust spoke. "The Council has observed. The Council will deliberate. In the meantime, the Varath fleet is advised to withdraw from contested space to avoid further escalation." Zix's mandibles clicked together in a sound of pure, grinding fury. She did not respond. The tactical drones around her had already begun issuing the retreat order. The Varath ships began to peel away from the line. Their engines burned as they pulled back into the dark. On the Confluence, Elara watched the Varath fleet withdraw with a hollow sense of victory. She had won. The Bloomsong would keep their nebula. The humans had proven their value, but the cost sat heavy in her chest. Chorus-of-Petals reached out a trembling frond and touched her shoulder. "You saved us," it whispered, "but I do not know if I should thank you." Elara did not answer. She was staring at the tactical feed. She looked at the debris field. It was all that remained of dozens of hybrid platforms. She was thinking about the factories that were already building more. A new channel opened on her console. The identifier was ancient, older than any human civilization. It pulsed with a frequency that made the air in the room feel thin. Memory of Dust, the echo-ancient, direct to Elara Tessere. She looked at the blinking icon. She felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. She accepted the call. The echo-ancient's voice did not emerge from any speaker or console. It came from the air itself. It was a vibration settling in Elara's chest like stones grinding in a deep cavern. The Galactic Council chamber had gone silent. Every delegate, including the towering crystalline forms of the Veil Shard, turned their attention to the ancient being. Even the chittering clustermind of the Illith delegation went still. Every entity in the chamber waited. Elara Tessere stood alone at the center of the circular chamber. Her palms were damp. Her jaw ached from clenching it for 3 straight days of negotiations. She had not slept well since the battle. She had not slept at all since the Varath fleet had withdrawn. The echo-ancient's question hung in the air like a held breath. It had asked her to define humanity's role, not to justify it, not to defend it, simply to say what her species was in words the galaxy could understand. She thought of the Foundry One, still orbiting the nebula's edge. It churned out defense platforms with the mindless patience of a machine that had never known fear. She thought of the engineers back in Sol, working in shifts, building 7 more just like it. She thought of the Bloomsong's sacred templates, now replicated across 100 human fabrication yards. She was exhausted, but she was not afraid. "We are not the finest blade," Elara said. Her voice carried through the chamber, amplified by the Confluence's living acoustics. "We are the whetstone and the forge." A ripple passed through the assembled delegates. The Varath contingent bristled, their chitinous limbs clicking against the floor. The Bloomsong representatives remained still, their fronds swaying in a slow, mournful rhythm. Elara continued, "We are the multiplier. We take the perfect, rare thing and we make it common. We take the miracle and we make it logistics." She paused, letting the words settle. The echo-ancient's presence pressed against her mind, not unkindly, but with the weight of eons. "The Bloomsong have the light," Elara said. "The Varath have the spear, we have the assembly line." Memory of Dust, the echo-ancient's physical vessel, was a sphere of cracked obsidian floating at the center of the chamber. It pulsed with a dim, internal glow. For a long time it said nothing. The silence stretched until Elara could hear her own heartbeat. Then the echo-ancient spoke again, not to her this time, but to the Galactic Council. "A new paradigm has entered the galactic stage. The humans do not seek to dominate through superior force. They seek to render force irrelevant through proliferation. This is not a weapon. It is a process." The chamber erupted. Delegates rose from their stations. Their voices overlapped in a dozen different languages and modes of communication. The Illith chittered in alarm. The Veil Shard pulsed with agitated light. The Varath ambassador clicked its mandibles in what might have been fury or fear. Elara stood motionless as the chaos swirled around her. She had done her part. Now the galaxy had to decide what to do with her. The forced peace took 3 more days to broker. Elara sat through every session, taking notes, offering clarifications, but saying little. The Varath fought every clause. The Bloomsong wept through every concession. The other species watched and learned. In the end, the Ember Nebula was placed under Bloomsong stewardship. The Varath were granted monitored transit lanes, enough to save face, not enough to threaten the sacred site. Human defense platforms would remain at the nebula's edge, under joint Bloomsong-human oversight, until the Council could establish its own permanent garrison. The true outcome was never spoken aloud. It did not need to be. The proxy war was over. Humanity had not won with a superior weapon. It had won by making the enemy's superior weapons irrelevant through sheer, staggering volume. The Varath could not outfight a factory. They could not outlast an assembly line. They had faced an opponent that treated war as a production problem. They had lost. Elara found Chorus-of-Petals waiting for her in the arboretum where they had first met. The Bloomsong liaison stood among its kin. Its fronds were heavy with dew or tears. Elara could not tell which. The air smelled of wet soil and something sweet, like honey left too long in the sun. Chorus-of-Petals extended a single frond. The gesture was slow, deliberate. In Bloomsong culture, it was the highest form of respect. "I do not know whether to thank you or mourn you," Chorus said. Its voice was soft, musical, but threaded with a tremor that had not been there before. "You have saved our sacred nebula. You have also shown us what humanity can do with a single template." Elara looked at the frond. She thought about the weight of that statement. She thought about the 7 Foundry-class vessels under construction in Sol's asteroid belt. She thought about the orders already coming in from the Illith and the Veil Shard, species who had watched the battle and taken notes of their own. She took the frond. It was warm and slightly rough, like the bark of an old tree. She held it for a moment, feeling the life pulse through it. "I do not know either," she said quietly. "But I think the galaxy just learned something about itself, and it will not forget." She let go of the frond and turned away. The arboretum's soft light fell on her shoulders as she walked toward the exit. Chorus-of-Petals remained still, watching her go. The station hummed its ancient song. Now a new rhythm joined it, the distant, steady pulse of human forges. The galaxy had changed, and there was no going back.